Thank you. You're all very welcome to this meeting. As it's the first meeting of the municipal year, we have the election of chairman. So I'm kicking proceedings off by inviting nominations for the position of chair.
Can we just nominate the man in the chair? Thank you.
Nominated and second, and I don't think there's enough people to have anybody else. So over to you, chair, for another year.
I'm sorry, Talani, can I just interrupt? I can't hear anything.
Oh, sorry.
Can you?
No. I can hear a muffled noise, but I don't know whether you're speaking directly into the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Right, I was just started off by thanking everybody who's voted for me. And then we're just going to move on to the second item, which is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 30th of November, 2023. And that is just to have a look, just make sure that it was a true and fair record, which it is. And thanks Noel for his hard work in producing them. And normally at this stage, would ask for a proposer and seconder.
No, it's okay. We just sorry. For minutes, we just need to agree as a group that these are an accurate record. There's no need for proposing or voting. So if the board is agreed,
Okay.
we can move on.
Thank you. The next item is apologies for absence. Have we got any, apart from the ones mentioned earlier?
Yes, just to mention that Kieran Guilfoyle is unwell and cannot join the meeting today.
Thank you. The next item is declarations of interest by members and officers. Have we had any declarations of interest by other members or officers? No? Thank you. Oh, this is going to speedily on to the next item, agenda item 5, the Nottinghamshire Local Pension Board advises local government pension scheme update, which John Raisin will take us through.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yes, I can. Thanks,
Right,
John.
okay. Members, this update covers 5 issues which are listed on page 15. I'll just go through them one to one. First one, the investment consultation. You'll recall that at the last meeting, I put a paper forward which described the government's proposals in the July 2023 investment consultation, next steps on investments. I prepared that report in early November, the 8th of November, and then on the 22nd, the government issued, very surprisingly, a consultation outcome, which I sort of tried to cover sort of orally at the meeting. But essentially, many of the government's initial proposals, or most of them, were actually included in the consultation outcome. But to put that into effect, you need regulations or statutory guidance. What's happened since is actually not too much, because by the time the election was called in May, no regulations or statutory guidance had been issued to put in place the main body of that consultation outcome, which was the investment pooling issues, and also those issues relating to pooling. Well, pooling was not in, the investment consultant amendment was not in, the levelling up amendment was not in, and the private equity amendment was not in. So all of those things haven't come into effect. The one bit that has come into effect is through another set of guidance, which is statutory guidance we talked about this morning in the training at length, which is a new statutory guidance on the annual report. And as a result of that, the proposals that pension fund committee members' activity for training is formally reported is now in. However, the requirement that they actually are required to do this isn't in. because the requirement for them to do it would have been contained in the regulations that haven't come out, or the guidance hasn't come out, but the recording of it is in the guidance that has come out. So they have to record what's happened, although it's not technically a policy, but I think it is an encouragement and it's the first step. The other thing that has been included and has happened, as I said this morning in the training, is that the new statutory guidance on the annual report has put into place all the additional reporting proposals that was included in that consultation outcome. As we discussed this morning, there are a huge raft of additional reporting points, both in pensions investment and pensions admin, and they have come in. I'll just touch on those a little bit later in this report in section 3. But the majority of it has not come in. We'll wait for after the election to see whether it comes in or whether there are further changes in the proposals. Climate risk reporting. Well, there's still no further update. We know there was a consultation back in 2022. We thought it was coming in from April 23. It didn't. We thought it was coming in from April 24. It hasn't so far. We're now sitting at the end of June, so they had to do it retrospectively. They theoretically could. To lining myself at the PLSA, and actually wasn't mentioning it there, and we now know that there is a full complement of civil servants at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we think there's going to be a lot of activity post the election on the LGPS because they've got the civil servants to do it. But it doesn't appear like issuing climate change regulations is top of the list. So whether it comes out for this year or not, still unclear. Perhaps not. Perhaps it may do. The annual pension fund report, we spoke about this at length this morning in the training, so I won't go over too much. But what we can say is that new statutory guidance was issued in March, dated April. It has the seal of statutory guidance, so funds are required to follow it. There's quite a few new reporting requirements in that, particularly in relation to investment, and particularly there in relation to A, pooling, and B, UK investment. And there are some tables to be filled in, which we talked about this morning again, which will bring back, I think, comparability between funds over years and also between different funds, because everyone's going to have to use the same table. The other huge change is the administration requirements. There are 7 pages of performance indicators in that new guidance. These are now a must, whereas back in 2019 guidance, there was a much smaller number, which were a should/may. So there's going to be a much bigger burden on pensions administration as well. The new guidance on pension fund reporting applies for the year 2023-24, so that's 1st of April 23, 31st of March 24. However, the new guidance was only issued at the end of March 24. So they have said that although it applies for 23-24, funds do not necessarily have to comply with it if they were not recording all the data that they're required to include, which of course someone wouldn't have known that data because it wasn't issued till March. So I think you'll see some funds doing some of this and all funds doing all of this probably from 24-25 onwards. LGPS accounts and audit, we covered this again this morning, but I'll just briefly cover this. We know from previous updates that the Scheme Advisory Board has asked the government to separate the pension fund account from the general fund accounts of the administrative authorities. We know that the government came back, the Minister wrote personally back to the Scheme Advisory Board and said, I agree with this, I'm getting my officials to work on it. Unfortunately, that happened in February 23, the Minister wrote. By March 24, it hadn't actually happened. There was a consultation on the future of audits, so the Scheme Advisory Board wrote again saying, look, we know you agree in principle, it's not happened. The fact they're not separate means that pension fund accounts are being held up because they have to wait till the general fund accounts and the value for money assessment are completed. Can we please have the separation? By the time the election was called, separation hadn't happened, so we are still in the same position for the accounts for 23-24. I think separation will happen. It's already happened in Scotland and Wales. Government here was committed to it. I think any future government will be. It's sensible, but it has not yet happened. So we'll probably have the same issue that we were talking about this morning, where pension fund accounts, and it happened in Nottinghamshire, as it happened in most authorities, that they were delayed because the auditors are under huge pressures and they are taking a lot of time to finish off the whole council accounts. If that wasn't the case, we'd probably get pension fund accounts signed off well before Christmas and in time for the annual report to be issued without any need for it to be reissued afterwards. And the final point in here, which I'm not going to talk much about because there's a report on the agenda about the Pension Regulator's General Code. That came in from March. It places some clear new requirements upon funds, and there's an officer report, which I'm sure Sarah will talk us through in a little while. That's my briefing, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to John Raisin?
You had them all this morning.
Sorry, Sarah, we had them all this morning.
Okay.
The questions that happened this morning, you see, when there's three of these on, they're done.
Oh, right. Right off.
Is that all right now? Yeah. No, what I said was, any questions, we had them this morning because we went through this morning in the training.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. Again, just to say that this report has been compiled for the Pensions Board to consider the report prior to the report being presented at the next available Pension Fund Committee. And our recommendation, the recommendation is that the Pension Board receives and considers the report of the advisor of the Pension Board along with identifying any actions required. And I think, as we mentioned, that a lot of this we talked about this morning in the training that we had. So we're happy to accept. Thank you very much. Then, okay, the next item again is John is going to lead us through is the Pension Board annual review, and this covers from the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024.
Thank you, Chair. This report has been prepared by myself in consultation with the Chair, and the Chair and I did discuss it on the telephone and what the content might be before it was put together, and the Chair had a look at it again before it came into the process. So we're both content with this report. The Chair may wish to add a few things towards the end of it. It basically, I've written it because it will go to the Pension Fund Committee, and that's why some of the things that you all know here only too well, you know, and some of us have been here a rather long time in terms of since the beginning of this board. So, as I say, it covers the activity. The purpose in terms of reference are there. That's mainly for when it goes to the Pension Fund Committee, and what the purpose of the board is. Board meetings, we had 2 last year. The minimum we're required to have under the constitution or the terms of reference the county set up was a minimum of 2. In 2021, the members of the board, then members of the board, 3 of them are here, so they wanted 4 meetings ideally. We managed to get to 3 in 21, 22 and 22, 23, and we would have had 3 in 23, 4, but we had to cancel the final meeting due to various circumstances. So we only met 2 occasions last year. On page 26, I've summarised the items that we discussed during the year. In terms of the membership of the board, there should be 8, which is positive because the regulations only require 4, which are 2 employees and 2 employers. Nottinghamshire County Council, I think, very appropriately decided we would have 8, so we're 8 employers, sorry, 4 employers, 4 employees. The problem we've had is recruitment, and this has been an ongoing issue for some years. Notwithstanding, I know the officers have made huge efforts to solve this. June 22-3, we had 5 members, and then on the 22nd of November last year, we lost 2 members. We had one immediately replaced, so we went up to 4 again. But at the end of the year, at present, we've only 4 members. You know, I would particularly like to thank the chair, Councillor Regulator, and Mark Evansthorpe, because they have been on this board an awful long time. The 3 of them contributed hugely, and if these three members hadn't stayed, I think a lot of the continuity of the board would have been lost, and we've been fortunate in that respect. And the city also have kept up a membership. So we've always had a city member. The problem is we've not been able to get the other members, and that is the big issue, which I know officers are trying on an ongoing basis to solve. But it is one which would make the board a lot more effective, because we are heavily reliant on a very few members coming. And today, I'm not sure the quorum here, but if we lose one or two members not turn up, we're in court and we've got a problem. So that is a huge issue, really, which is beyond the board members or myself to solve. But it is a huge problem. I covered the support for the board during the year. We've had good support from the officers, from Sarah, from Kieran, from Noel, and I particularly like to mention John Clues, who I think did an awful lot of work with the board. I had lots of conversations with John in the 9 years that he supported the board, and I've paid tribute to him in this paragraph there, which I think is well deserved. As I say, the board has an independent advisor, which is not unique, but most boards don't. I think, again, it was a positive thing from the county, because they were prepared to bring someone in who, could express a different view from perhaps, an additional view to the county. So that is a positive thing. Turning to training and development, I think last year a lot of what went on in the board went towards meeting the training and development requirements. We had a presentation from Barry Mackay, and I actually watched that again when I was preparing this report, and I actually had forgotten until I watched it again how much Barry Mackay went through. Not only talking about different types of valuations, but in detail the fund valuation 2022, and I thought he spoke about that in a very, well, understandable way, because, actuarial valuations can be completely impossible to understand. I think we were very lucky that Barry Mackay came along, and the way he presents made it understandable. I watched it again and thought, yeah, this was good, and that was positive. We also had a legislation and governance training from myself on the 7th of June 23. That updated what you'd previously heard prior to COVID, because things have changed in terms of governance and legislation. We looked last year briefly at all the fund strategies. They were brought here. And also I proposed that we would carry on with the SIPFA pensions board training framework, and it was agreed we'd have the training this morning on accounts, audit and reporting. That has taken place, so we can report that. We also had the LGPS updates last year, which we've obviously had one again today. I think those, which I always make those nationally focused rather than Nottinghamshire focused. So my update tends to be a nationally focused thing, whereas the officer reports tend to be Nottinghamshire focused. And I think that's the right balance, because if you have too much of one, not enough of the other, too much national, you're not really looking at Nottinghamshire. If it's all Nottinghamshire, you're not getting the national picture. So hopefully all of that training you've had, much of which is the sort of national basis from the actuary, from myself, but also the local basis in terms of the fund documentation, I think shows that the board did receive the sort of education and understanding last year. The risk register, hugely important, probably the most important thing a board or a committee can do. Officers identify the risks, you look at them, you review them, you ask questions. You did that actively last year. Pensions admin is, I think, the crucial thing for any pension board in terms of operational things, because this board consists of employers and employees. And what's the principal link between an employer with a fund? It's with pensions admin. What's the link between an employee and a fund? It's with pensions admin. So it's useful that we particularly focus on that. And last year we received, as we do always, the annual report of the work of the pensions admin team, which looks at the performance, the sort of KPIs, the major issues that are done, the major challenges they've faced, and major achievements. That was all in there. Again, John presented that report, and there was a lot of member questioning about that. We also received updates on the important issues, the big important projects, GMP, which has been going on for several years here and everywhere else, and also, of course, McLeod, which again is continuing. And then I finally just touch on the work programme is that, we do get a work programme, we look at that and we will amend and adjust it as necessary, and that will happen again at the end of this meeting. What's the conclusion of all of this? Well, I think we know that the fund operates within the overall framework of the LGPS. My view is that what the board saw in 23-24 gives assurance that we're clearly seeking through both the fund is both through risk management and the pensions admin functions, which are the two issues we really looked at. Risk management overall in terms of governance, pensions admin as operational, that these are where the fund is genuinely seeking to properly comply with its obligations. I think that was clear. We don't have an investment decision-making role, but it's quite clear that both the regulations and the terms of reference that Nottinghamshire set out say we do have a role in reviewing governance and operational arrangements relating to investment. Now, you'll recall that in 2022-3, we did look at this. Now, we didn't last year, 3-4. I think it's an issue we ought to go back to. So that's why, and I talked to the chair about this before it went in, we've suggested here that we should receive a briefing on investment policy and governance. Now, that could be done in one of two ways. Either the fund could ask the independent advisor to the pension fund committee to come along and talk to us. That isn't obviously within his brief, so they'd have to agree that with him. Or fund officers come along and talk to us about how the policy strategy of investment by Nottinghamshire County Council is developing, and describe to us the investment governance roles, what the roles of the officers, the independent advisor, etc. are. That's one thing. And secondly, I think it was March 22, we had a presentation from LGPS Central on how the pool is progressing, not pooling in the context of Nottinghamshire, but how the pool is progressing. And we think again, that Chair and myself, it will be very good to get them back again this calendar year, so they can make a presentation to us in the presence of fund officers, because fund officers, will have comments to make on that. So those are the two that we thought. So that's the review. I'll just leave it to the chair to add anything he wants to do to that. That's just my thoughts. Any comments or questions? Happily to talk about them.
Okay. Well, I think for me, one of the most important bits was mentioned is the fact that even though we, as the standard board, we oversee, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the committees that we don't actually have a chance to actually hear what goes on. So things looking like the investment strategy, as John mentioned, or as we mentioned, the pooling presentation, because the way that the pool first started off to how it is now, there's been a great movement forward, and there's a lot more need now for pools to actually report more. Before, it used to be the fact that the pool, in quotation marks, used to think we give them the money, they go away, they make the decisions, and then they tell us what they've done with it, and they keep forgetting that we're actually, in terms of central pool, an eighth owner of it. So there's that bringing back that responsibility to report back. And the other thing as well is that, as we mentioned earlier in the training, looking at investments, how do we allocate our assets? We need to know how that is done, because we're having a look at the reports from the fund as to what's what. And if we don't really know what's what, we need to kind of have that detail on us. So I think definitely that will be something that I would recommend that we come out and have a meeting around, so we all know what's happening and have an idea. Otherwise, we'll just sit here being told and not really have a chance to interact or ask questions. Well, open to any questions. Yeah.
Why don't we invite the chair of the actual committee to one of these meetings, so that what you just said can be presented to the chair, and then work with him or her, whoever it is, him at the moment, to how we can profile that back into the board, because it's their accountability to us as a board. And I think, and I mean, he was in the building today, and I thought he was in the building. Maybe he was invited here, but he wasn't invited. I don't know if he was invited or not, or didn't come. I don't really know. But I think we should work as a board with the committee, through the chair of the committee, to answer and get relevance, because he's off to the pool, he's off here, he's off there,
Mm.
and that's his role as chair of that committee, and his role should also be to keep us informed of what the committee is doing. And I don't think we've got that tied up properly.
Okay. Any other questions? Because John also sits on other pension boards as well. So it'd be nice to hear what other pension boards do around, because we can't be the only one who's requesting this. So I want to find out which is the best way of having it done, so that we're not wasting anybody's time or having a meeting for the sake of discussing one item when there's loads more to discuss. So John Raisin would like to.
No, I think Councillor Dare's proposal's right. I mean, as you say, I'm actually the independent chair of Merseyside Pension Board, which decided to appoint an independent chair back in 2015. But we have periodic attendance by the chair, who does an open invite to come, and the chair of the pension committee does come. I've dealt with, well, we're on our fourth one now, but I've dealt with 3 previous ones, and they've come along, and it is useful that the chair comes along. I think it makes that link to the committee as well, which is important. And the other thing is that it's I think the presentation of this report as well to the committee. I mean, this is remitted to the committee. That's our recommendation. The one time that I've been to the committee, because I have no role with the committee, was to present this report. Now, actually, that going forward really probably would be the chair. The chair didn't come. The then chair of the board didn't come to that meeting. I went to it alone. But perhaps going forward, it'd be the chair who presented it rather than me. That's the decided. But that's another thing. We need to build that interaction, you're right, between the chair of the board and the board itself and the committee. And that's certainly one thing I think does need to happen, is the chair come here, and that happens certainly at Merseyside Will, and also me as chair going there at least once a year and presenting on this, because I've found that when I've gone to Merseyside Will, we get a lot of questions about what the board is, and they've come to understand it, and I think that has helped an awful lot. And I think you're right. I think it's only happened once, unfortunately, here, where this report has actually been formally presented, and that was in 2020, literally just before COVID. It was March 2020, because I remember, and I presented to that. So that would be another positive, definitely.
No, thank you. And I also, because one of the other things that I do is I also attended the pool, and it was interesting because at the pool meeting with all the other pension funds in the central pool, was that what came out was the need, because everybody does their training differently, and what came out was that some of the other funds and committees, what they do is they have centralized training. So certain things, so investment, everybody will be invited, the committee as well as the board. And then there'll be those bits which are just the remit of which is different to each committee. So I think probably going forward, that's a way forward. And definitely inviting the chair of the pension committee to this will be good, and vice versa. And I think that's probably the first rung of things to do, to start that conversation, have those invitations. And then from there, then we can work out how can we really best make the use of the time and of the connections and of the information that we need to know. Thank you.
It's all about sharing best practice, and we're all there for the same reason at the end of the day, to make sure that the performance of the pension fund operates. Okay, each one has his own role, but it's about that. So if we work more jointly than separately, perhaps we get a better outcome for all those involved going forward. Can I just ask Sarah a question? Sarah, on the membership of this board, we seem to be struggling to get people. Is there a reason for that? Is there?
I was going to update, actually. I'll ask to update on that. So we currently have an active advert out to recruit for both pension committee vacancies and also pension board vacancies. So that advert has gone out on a range of pay slips. It's gone out in the pensioners leaflet. It's gone out on our website as well. So the closing date for both of those vacancies on committee and board is the 30th of June. For the pension board, we currently have 2 applications. One is received from a scheme employer and one is received from a member that holds a deferred benefit with the fund. So obviously the closing date is on Sunday, so we might get a flurry of activity on Sunday. And then once that advert is closed and I've received all the applicants, I will be in touch with the chair of the board for us then to have a look at what whether we need to go to a formal selection process. But I think there needs to be some form of process to appoint people. We've always struggled to appoint people. I don't, whether it's the level of commitment, I'm not sure. I don't have any real strong feeling as to why people aren't applying for that. I don't know whether John has seen similar issues. At at Merseyside where he's the independent chair with regards to membership. At the moment we do have 2 applicants, which I think is positive.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay.
John, there was a question in there for you about how you're finding things at your other ones.
I think Merseyside is in a much better position, which I think, I'm not saying that's a national position, because I think boards are struggling. I think they've been lucky for a number of reasons. We have, of the original 9 of us, there is still 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's 5 of us are still there in some form or another. One was an employer rep, he retired, he's come back as an employee rep. So I think we've still got about 4 of the originals. But they've always managed to get reps, strange enough. I don't know why particularly, but they have. When they've advertised, they've always managed to fill the numbers. On the employer side, interestingly enough, we now have 2 of the Section 151 officers sitting there. I'm not recommending 151 officers, by the way. I used to be one. 2 places. I'm certainly not recommending them. But we do have. It's interesting. We now have 2 of the 151 officers from 2 of the 5 councils who've come on. One came on board about 3 years ago. Others come on board this year. Both been very positive, actually. We've never had. I forget how it's constituted here. We've never had a district council, as far as I know, employer. I know because the cities are unitary. I don't know whether that is possible here, but that might be one way. He's looking for a district council that be, HR or finance are probably the 2 logical ones. I wonder whether I forget the terms of reference now, Sarah, but that's one way. I think certainly is that we get the district council as employer if it's within the terms of ref. You could get one from there if we really push the district councils, because that's certainly. I mean, up in Merseyside, they're unitaries, they're unitary council, 5 unitaries for that. But we've got district councils here. If we could get a rep off one of those, senior HR or finance person, I'd have thought that would have helped, possibly.
John, I think if I can just come back on that, I think when you look at the size of scheme employers within the Nottinghamshire Fund, actually the district and borough councils are smaller from a membership basis than some of the multi-academy trusts now. So I think it's about having some probably across the diversity of the size of scheme employers that we have. So I think if we wait to see what we get in on Sunday, at least we do have 2, which would strengthen the current position of the board if they were successful in appointment. But then I think it would be better that we go back out again and probably just ask you to have a look at our adverts, see if there's anything that you can suggest that you may have incorporated at Mersey. But Joe Toomey has been leading on it from Democratic Services perspective. So, there's an advert out there, there's an application form which is fairly streamlined, but I'm not too sure where we go from here going forward.
You're right, Sarah, about the employers. The reason I go back to councils is because I think they understand that you might get engagement from the districts.
Right.
I think one of the
Okay.
problems
Yeah.
with the multi-academy trusts, and I can't speak from here, is that in some ways LGPS is a bit of a side issue because, teachers' pensions is their main thing. It's an education authority, in inverted commas, education provider, and LGPS may be low on their priorities. And that may be an issue where with councils, even though I know some of the districts, maybe in inverted commas, mature employers now with fewer employees than they had 20 years ago, they'll still get LGPS and it's still their big issue.
Absolutely.
So you're right to go from both points. And I'm thinking if there was an easy win, and so long as the membership, from the constitution of the houses, I would have thought the district councils were a place where is there 80? Am I right? Is there about 8 in Nottinghamshire? About 8 district councils?
Eight.
About 8, isn't there? Roughly.
I think it's 6, is it not?
But
anyway, it's a new point.
I'd have thought from within those, if we could pick up one member, that would be useful. You're right about the multi-academy trusts. I think the point you've made is very pertinent. They perhaps don't realise how important they are now in the scheme. And perhaps if you, directly approach them and try and push it that way. On the employee side, well, if I think about Merseyside, we have two of them traditionally have been trade union reps and 2 have been others. I still think there's always a positivity in going to the trade unions because they will probably provide a rep and you'll probably get someone who's informed. My experience of trade union reps, and Mark's a good example here, but same with the Merseyside reps, is A, they attend, B, they tend to stay on for a long time, C, they tend to contribute positively, and D, you can usually get one. So my view would be, if we could go to the trade unions, we might get another one. So my idea to get 2 would be district councils 1, trade unions 1. I think you could possibly get 2 more if you really pushed it those 2. And obviously, Mark's G&B, aren't you, Mark? If we could go to one of the other unions and try and get Eunice and say to push them to get somebody on, we might get that way. That's just my thoughts. We could get 2 possibly from the other councils and the trade unions.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Mark?
Yeah, with regards to that, Sarah, is it possible you can send me a link so we can look at the selection criteria for a member?
I can send you the link to the advert, but as I said, that closes on Sunday, but I will send it to you, yes.
Is there no way we can extend that date?
I'll need to speak to Jo Toomey about that because she's managing the process.
All right, thank you.
But I would suggest that there is the potential to do that given the current level of returned applications.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I think if there's any other questions, quite happy to take this to the next agenda item. But I think we're going to miss a trick here because I think this is probably the best place to do. But just to record our thanks to John Clues for all this time and all his work with us, and for the time that he's been with us. So if that could be forwarded, that would be brilliant.
I'll pass that on to him, Talani.
Thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda is item 7, which is the LGPS Governance Conference, which was held between the 18th and 19th of January this year. I think John Clues and myself went there. And in addition to what's covered in the papers, there's nothing more to really add apart from the fact that a lot of this was covered in the training. But however, if members would like more information, please feel free to contact me, and I can give you as much information as I can. But one of the nice things was with going to this was that we're able to not only just meet other pension funds, but we also kind of went to the same panel discussions. So there won't be anything more to what John has added that I won't add. And we spoke about it on the way back anyway, about what was going to be included and what's going to be most important. So, as I said, just a big thank you for that. And again, a lot of this stuff is pretty much stuff that we'll be coming back to. There's loads of stuff which, at the time of writing, was very pertinent, but now once the election has been called, a lot will depend on the election result as to what will go forward, what will stay, and what might be stopped. So we'll wait to hear further details from there. John, have you got a?
Just got one comment actually from something which is in here, which I think very pertinent, which is paragraph 13. This is the statement by Councillor Phillips about SAB. And it says here, on pooling, he urged funds to take on leadership. Now, you and I, Chair, were both at the PLSA, and we heard Councillor Phillips say something very similar.
Yeah.
He said something very similar about pooling. There's no doubt that pooling is going to go forward, and it doesn't matter who wins the general election. I think everyone is quite clear that both the major political parties are committed to pushing this forward. However, as the Chair said, pools don't exist of their own account. They only exist to serve the administrative authorities. But there has been, I think in some places, a situation where funds haven't taken on leadership and they've allowed pools and pool employees, they're not officers actually, they're employees of the pool, to set agendas more than perhaps ought to have been. And that's not a criticism of the pool officers or the pool employees or the funds, but I think in some cases pools have had to and have pushed things, perhaps more than they might have done, and there hasn't been sufficient involvement for whatever reason by the funds. And I think Councillor Phillips there at that conference, and certainly the PLSA, emphasised this, that it's time for funds to take on leadership, because pooling is going forward, as we spoke about this morning at length, and I produced that table from the new statutory guidance on reporting. There is an awful lot more reporting going to be going on about pooling, because the government is committed to pooling, and as I understand it, should the government change, they will also be committed to pooling. So if it's going to happen, funds need to make sure it happens in their best interests. That's the one thing I would say, and I think that, again, is why we need to hear from the fund officers about their approach to investment, but we also need to hear from the pool so as we can get a view as to what they are up to and how they are genuinely assisting and pushing forward the needs and desires of Nottinghamshire and the other 7 LGPS funds within the pool.
Okay. Sarah, have you got anything to add, or anything that from the report might have propped up and is now more relevant?
No, I think obviously you were best placed to comment on the report, given that you attended it. But obviously I support the comments that John has made as well, but nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, this moves us swiftly on to item 8, which is the Pension Regulator General Code of Practice. And I'm just trying to think. The recommendation here is that we note the pension fund notes the content of this report. Would somebody like to take it forward?
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. So this report, it details the new Regulators Code of Practice, and obviously John has referred to that in his earlier report. The background information is previously there have been several different codes of practice. I'm sure that board will remember that John and I've previously talked about the Regulators Code of Practice number 14. Those codes have now been brought together in this one consolidated general code of practice. Obviously, it is covering both public and private sector pension schemes. So there are elements of the code that are not appropriate or don't apply to the LGPS. So clearly, we as a fund need to measure ourselves or to baseline ourselves against the new code. And actually, following a presentation to Pensions Committee of a very similar report, we sought approval, which was given to engage Barnett Waddingham to do a gap analysis of the fund's position with the new code. So I have been in discussion with Barnett Waddingham for them to undertake that gap analysis. Their approach is initially they will come to the website, they will actually look themselves to see what we are publishing, how we satisfy the code of practice, and then we'll come to ask officers if we're able to share other documentation that fulfills those criteria. Within the report, there is a link to the code. So if people are looking for something to read, then you can do that. It is obviously quite an extensive document covering various sections which are detailed in paragraph 14. Obviously, once the gap analysis has been undertaken by Barnett Waddingham, one of the other actions will be that they will also be producing an action plan that will be built on a time frame, what we need to do within short, medium and longer term position. And also it may well be that we engage them further to undertake some of the work to satisfy some of those items that may be missing. So clearly it's going to be quite an extensive piece of work, which I think on an ongoing basis, clearly we will report back on the gap analysis and then we will report on the action plan. But on an ongoing basis, we will obviously be reporting on our fund's compliance with the code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Adair?
Yeah, just Sarah, on 16, that talks about cyber and pension scams. Have we had any problems with that? I know it's out there globally, excuse me, where this is happening. I was just thinking locally, have we had any problems with that or not?
Okay, so we've not had, from a cybersecurity perspective, bearing in mind that obviously this is a public meeting, then we haven't had any issue with that at this time. We are going to be doing some work because again, cyber risk, cyber security is a big thing for the regulator and does have a specific section within the code. We're going to be doing some work with Aon. We've done some baselining of our cyber position currently. We're then going to do some further work with Aon with regards to what else we need to put in place. But I think that's also around training for board committee and officers. Obviously, from our perspective, from a funds perspective, there are a number of things which I think support strengthening our cyber position. One is that we will be moving the UPM system off-prem into a hosted environment with our supplier Civica, and obviously their hosted data center has all those other accreditations like the ISO standard, etc. However, the County Council has recently become fully compliant with Cyber Essentials Plus, which is, the standard or one of the standards for cyber security. So I think that's a positive. The other thing for us ultimately, excuse me, as you know, and I will talk about it shortly, is we are going to ultimately enable our members to have access via a portal, and any of these portals these days require multi-factor authentication, so 2 routes to verify who the individual is who's logging on. You're probably used to that if you do any form of online banking. You log in with a password with face recognition, finger recognition, and then you're also required to input, say, a 6-digit code that comes from, say, a mobile device or an email. From a pension scam perspective, obviously we include with the benefit statements that go out, the pension scam leaflet. We also, from a transfer request perspective, are required by the regulator to undertake quite extensive due diligence checks that are additional checks that came in a couple of years ago. So people have to fill in a specific questionnaire. If their fund is over 30,000, they have to take independent financial advice. Any of those transfers that potentially are proceeding are also traffic lighted as well, and there are lists of schemes where the fund would not agree to transfer out. Following the City Council's issuing of a Section 114 notice, we were contacted by the pension regulator. We were asked to answer a number of questions, which we did alongside colleagues from the City Council, but we have been asked to monitor specifically if we see any increase in requests for transfer estimates and transfers out. Any trends where we're seeing members come to the fund saying they're wishing to transfer out to a particular fund, or where that activity may be supported by an individual or a named financial advisor. So we're just in the process of putting various monitoring mechanisms in place so that we've got a month-on-month check to see if we see any increased activity. So certainly, you know, we are able to see if there's that increased approach given the city's position. So I think we've got most angles covered there, Councillor Adair.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you. And it's a timely question. It was something I was going to ask, because even the TPO, the pensions ombudsman, they also had a cyber attack in June. So it just shows you that even though people might think, well, pensions is quite safe, would be wanting to get information, just shows you nothing is actually safe. Mm-hmm. So, and I think for us, it's also on the work program, and it's going to be a standing item. And as it is going to be a standing item, we agreed that there'll be some bits of it simply because of what's involved and some of the companies involved, that we might have a restricted agenda, because there's information on there that would not, which people want to get in, would know what to do and what we're up to. But if it was restricted, then we could speak in confidence. Thank you. All right, thank you very much for that. And again, just to go back on the recommendation that the Pension Fund Board notes the contents of the report. Okay. Okay. All right. The next item is yourself, Sarah, and I think you're going to get loads of questions on this, so be prepared.
Okay. And this is...
That's the local government pension scheme, transforming pension administration update.
Transformation. Yeah. Okay. All right. So as the chair's just said there, this is to update board on the delivery of the transforming pension administration through digital development, new ways of working. So board will be aware that pension administration is changing nationally. We've previously reported that. Obviously, we've got the regulator's new code, but also I think given that we are now the other side of COVID, obviously during the COVID period, we saw quite dramatic changes in a whole host of services being digitised, and the expectation that individuals have of being able to transact in the modern world 24/7. So set out in the report are some of the key aims, or the key aims of the Transforming Pensions programme, which was approved by committee in 2019. Obviously, the pandemic did have an impact on our progression of some of those items, plus also the number of national projects that came to us left field, such as GMP, McLeod, and obviously now our preparation for the national dashboards. We also, as a result of COVID, have seen a significant increase in the number of individuals taking both their deferred benefits but also choosing to retire early, and also a significant increase in deaths as well, which at the height of COVID, the deaths we were experiencing in the pensions office really did mirror those images that we saw. So you'll have heard me talk before that the foundation to our transformation programme has been about our data audit and improvement. Everything that we do within administration is driven by the quality of data. So we have been working with a third party, Intellica, to review all of our data. So obviously, as our membership has increased over the last few years, the number of members who've become part of that review has increased. Also, we've had to stop some of that work while we've diverted capacity and attention to some of those national projects, which again have also required collection of data. So GMP reconciliation, McLeod being another key one. So significant behind the scenes activity, you'll see the table in paragraph 19 just sort of demonstrates, you know, the progression that we have made over the last few years. We have actually been running over 430 data validation checks on every single member's record, and bear in mind that some members have several records within our system. And obviously we report our data scores to the regulator, which we are required to do. And now back in November 23, again from the table you'll see there was no significant improvement from the previous year. Now that was because we had to put certain things on hold while we address certain aspects for McLeod and GMP. Now obviously, we're still waiting to undertake quite significant pieces of work for McLeod. The GMP programme has moved on significantly. We have corrected a number of the overpayments. We did that in April, and obviously we wrote out to people correcting their pension. We, over the next few months, will be addressing the underpayments. So once those, both McLeod and GMP have progressed further, we'll be able to come back and run some of the data validation checks that we've been holding off from the true data audit and improvement, which will see those data scores improve significantly. That work on the data audit has actually enabled us to really start to progress our automation as well. So we have been working with our supplier Civica, and we've built an automated process for our levers. So that enables us to put a lever through an automated process rather than an officer touching one individual record. So the sorts of things that we're seeing in the early days now are, for example, if you had one officer processing one deferred benefit, it could take anything between 30 and 40 minutes to do that complete end-to-end process. Specifically, if you've got some missing data, you'd have to contact the employer, etc. Because of the data audit work and because of how we've built this automated route so it does data validation checks, we're now seeing the processing of an end-to-end lever where we've got all the data at around 5 minutes. Now we're just about to implement some further tweaks to that automated process with some pre-population of fields, etc., and that will start to reduce that further. So we're now working to build up a program to automate processes. So we're looking at automating the refund process. We are also looking to automate aspects of the aggregation process, but also the way that we've built the automated lever process, the data validation it does at the beginning of that process. We've built that in a modular way so that actually we can bolt that onto the front of any of our processes. So a death, a divorce, a retirement. So it does a data validation check for us. So that's we are really pushing on the boundaries of automation there. There's only one other Civica client who's currently doing that, but they don't have the extensive program that we have with Civica to do that. And I'm hoping that when I bring the admin performance report later on this year, that you'll be able to see the significant improvements we are making because of automation. And I think from my perspective of one of our risks being resourcing and recruitment, again, you will have heard me talk before that actually what we need to do is to automate our shall we say more straightforward mundane processes to release the capacity within the pensions office to deal with our members where they may have complex service history, where we may want to start to consider what's the sort of service we want to be offering going forward to our members. Again, during COVID, Civica have redeveloped their employers portal. So we had about half a dozen scheme employers currently using that. So alongside the automation work, we've also been implementing the new employers portal. That's due for technical sign off after the penetration testing this week. That should be signed off next week, and then we will move the existing scheme employers onto that portal. Now, Civica again have also redeveloped their monthly returns process, and it is now a prerequisite to roll out the portal ahead of monthly returns. So again, working with Civica, we are now starting to scope out what our monthly returns project would look like. Currently, we're in the process of this year's year end, running through to the issuing of active benefit statements by the statutory deadline end of August. Our deferred benefit statements went out week commencing the 17th of June. And this, again, should get us to the point where it smooths the peak of activity that we have at a year-end basis. The other activity that we've been doing, again, as I mentioned earlier, to really, one of the things is to support our cyber risk, but also due to the County Council's own strategy to move to the cloud. We have now signed a contract with Civica to move our own UPM system out of the council's data centre to a hosted environment. Preliminary activity for that is ongoing, and that actual move should start to take place from October of this year. Resourcing, again, we have discussed at previous boards that this has been challenging not only for ourselves but also for other pension funds. Obviously, we have had leavers generally down to our own staff retiring. We generally don't have turnover for other reasons than this. Obviously, people retiring creates promotional opportunities for staff, and I think when we reflect back on what's happened over the previous years, when people have retired, promotion opportunities have come up. It's generally been a succession plan from within the office. People have moved up the grades. Obviously mindful that we have some experienced staff who are heading towards retirement. So we're starting to look at what some of our succession planning is. So we have 2 people where they've flexibly retired, and we've appointed 2 successors to their reduced hours element, so that then we have this seamless move as they ultimately retire. The person who's working the other half of the job can move into the full job. I think one of the real successes for us this year has been our initial intake of apprentices. We had an absolutely astonishing response to our advert, down to the fact that we actually interviewed 27 individuals. I have to say they were predominantly young individuals. And from that cohort, we recruited 4 of them. So they started in February. So I think our approach is that we're going to look to grow our own. The approach that the County Council takes is, if an apprentice is successful in completing their apprenticeship, they are guaranteed a permanent role. And clearly all the feedback that we've had on the current individuals are that they will be successful in the completion of their apprenticeship. One of the vacancies I'll be looking to recruit to shortly is the training and development manager within the pension fund. That's a new post that we haven't recruited to previously, and as part of that role, that individual will be taking on the ongoing programme of recruiting apprentices. The other thing I would like to get to point in being able to offer is our existing members of the team, giving them the opportunity to undertake the apprenticeship programme, as well as some of the professional qualifications. I think what we need to start to consider is how we advertise our roles as a career, not just a job within pensions, that people can come in, they can get a grounding in administration, but from that point they can move into, for example, the systems team, the technical team, customer service, and could even transition across from admin to investments. So I think certainly that is very positive for us at this moment in time. So yes, still we have a lot of work to do from a transformation point of view. I think we've got a strong foundation in place. We've got a number of work streams where work is progressing as well. So that is the latest update on our transformation. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for your report. Questions? Councillor Adair?
Well, I think what Sarah's just explained to us there, she's got a lot of work on her plate, or on her table, or on her desk, or on her. But it sounds as though the resources. The one thing I remember out of the pension that created extra resource or needed extra resource was the compliance of the those getting the data to you and on that side of it, from different employers and all the rest of it. Has that improved, or is that still creating havoc with your resource base where you could be getting on with other things?
I think what's going to happen, Councillor Adair, is the fact that when we move to monthly returns, the fact is that the scheme, we start to be able to pass back to the scheme employer on a much what's the word here? Let me come back a bit. When we move to a monthly return, the scheme employer will only be able to submit the monthly return if if the system validates it. So, for example, if they've added somebody to the monthly return that they've never notified us of as a starter, that return won't come through to us. So it pushes back on the scheme employer to correct the data before it comes to us. The situation we're in at the moment is that obviously if they send us in a form and you know, we are still predominantly on paper forms, if they fail to fill in a field, we only sort of like, we review that when we get that form, we have to send it back. We then have to chase it. When you've got an automated system, it leaves the responsibility firmly in the court of the scheme employer. So data does continue to be our nemesis, but not as it used to be, because we've had good response to the requests for data from McLeod. We've had to obviously chase some, but actually I think in general, scheme employers have responded to that.
Thanks for that, because I know that takes up resource that you don't really have
Yes.
available to you.
Yes.
And if they did their job properly, you wouldn't need to resource it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think just a question from me. Well, a couple of questions, which is in terms of the monthly reports, how are we working with the usual suspects?
Yeah. Right. I think when you have a look at the size or the number of scheme employers that the fund has, 280 plus, when you analyse that, there's actually only probably 20% of our scheme employers cover 80% of our membership. So obviously the largest scheme employer is the county council. So we will look to move the county council onto monthly returns first. One, because that's within my gift, because the payroll sits under my area of responsibility as well. They're also, almost virtually sitting next door to the pensions team. The other factor is we provide a payroll bureau service for a number of other scheme employers, so we will look to move them on first. We are aware of the more challenging scheme employers, and obviously we will look to ensure that the support that they get to move on to monthly returns is tailored to our experience with them, rather than them naming them in this public forum. We know who they are, we know what we need to do with them. Clearly, if we're having issues, then we will raise that at both committee and board, and we will be seeking committee and board's support to escalate within those organisations. But as we go forward, any new scheme employers that come on board, they will be brought straight into this new way of working. They won't transition from an old to the new world.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've just got an interesting question, which is something to do with the location of the new county hall, as we say, just off Hucknall. How will that affect how pensions admin will work? Because that's, if they're going to be moving or having to travel there, then that's an additional travel distance. Or is it going to be
okay? Yeah. So the Business Services Centre, which includes pensions administration, is not earmarked to go to Totwig Hay Farm. We will be having accommodation back over at Trentbridge House. The vast majority of people that work both in pensions and within the Business Services Centre do so remotely from home. So the move out of County Hall to Totwig Hay is not going to impact the delivery of the service. I think myself and any other senior officer who needs to present at either board or committee will be the ones that are travelling to the new committee rooms at Topwig Hay. So it's not going to impact service delivery at all.
Thank you. I've answered two questions in one there. One was obviously from the board, which was, well, if the move does happen, well, we're going to meet. So thank you for answering that bit.
Well, I guess Noel, I guess the board will meet at the new council chamber in Topwig Hay.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you for that report, Sarah. I'd like to just say thank you, because obviously we know that recruitment's been a problem in the past. Giving us the reassurance that you're looking at personal development within your department, and
Yeah.
and keeping that knowledge in house, because once again, I will say, I know it's a difficult process.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report. I don't think there's any other questions in addition. Right, we shall move on to the next item, which is agenda item 11, which is the pension board work program.
We just sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yes.
Can we have? Sorry, I moved one there. The risk register, item 10. Could we have a verbal update?
You can, yes, yeah. So again, I think board are aware that we've been doing a review of the risk register, working with Zurich Insurance. I think the comment was made earlier that previously we've had quite an extensive risk register which has been out in the public domain. I think there are certain risks, and certainly the mitigation around those risks, that we would want to discuss as an exempt item. So it's not in the public domain. So the work we've been doing with Zurich is to separate out what would be considered to be an operational risk from a strategic risk. So it'll be elements of the strategic risk that are presented, but obviously board can see the entire risk register. So prior to John's retirement, John and I were working with Zurich and have now reviewed all the admin risks. We're going to take two of those risks and drill down further to present when we do this, so that we can present to you the work that we've done to drill further into particular risk, the mitigations that we've put in place, and to then discuss with both board and committee, are there further mitigations you would like to see? Obviously, further mitigations may include investment or funding, which may reduce it further. Then what we would be looking at for the new approach is that both board and committee select one or two risks on an annual basis initially for us to go and do some further work on. So at the moment, the timetable is that Tamsin from the investment side and myself would present the new risk register to committee. It's on the work programme for November. So once that's been to committee, I would be looking to bring that to the next board meeting. But obviously, if there are any particular risks people wanted to raise today, I'd be happy to talk through those.
Okay, thank you very much. Any items on the risk register that we've been invited to bring forward? No?
Chairman, we'll wait for Sarah.
Okay. Did you hear that, Sarah?
No.
It's been that we'll wait for you.
You wait for me.
That's it,
Okay.
yeah. Right, that moves us on to the next item, which is the work programme. And that's in the pack that was sent out. And what we can do is just have a quick look at it and decide if there's any amendments that are required to the work programme. I know that from the earlier conversations that obviously it was to invite the LGPS Central Pool to make a presentation to us, to also have a presentation on the investment strategy and how that's going to affect and how that works. And an open invitation to the chair of the pension committee to attend our meetings. Is there anything I've missed off there?
I think, Chairman,
I-
what we're really looking at there was that I don't know whether it be Tamsin or who else internally would do an investment in press, a presentation to us about investment and the functions of the pension fund, and they probably to be sensible to do the pooling and that at the same time, because they do work hand in glove with each other, as they say. So that could be done as one thing at a future meeting, maybe in October or something. I see there's opportunities there. I don't know whether the time frame is right, Sarah, but that's just, if you look at the October one, there's only a couple of
Yes.
items on it, whether that could be pulled in at that particular time. I think that's what
Yes,
that's what we discussed.
yeah, I think Tamsin will obviously need to comment on that herself, but I would suggest that the revised risk register came to the January meeting. I'm not sure what the timetable will be for the regulator's code gap analysis. But I think if the board were happy, I would work with Noel just to populate various reports into the work programme from October onwards, and then probably we could circulate that after for comment, because I think it's quite light as it currently sits, and I think there are a number of things that do need to be placed, but probably we don't have the time frame for them at this current moment.
Okay. Oh, thank you. That's it. And also, I think there might probably be, and we've got to choose a good time for this, because one of the pension fund annual report must do is going to be the way that they're going to be reported in 2024, of which there's about 7 pages of KPIs that will need to be included in there. And I know it's probably is a lot whilst we've got new members of staff coming in and you've got a few roles that you need to complete. Is that one that we can put in for a little bit later, or do you feel that it's something that?
Well, I think, Chair, and I need to just have a look at what we are currently reporting from a KPI perspective against what that full set is. And it may well be that we're already reporting on some of those areas and we're not missing any, too much. But I think if you're happy, if I work with Noel, we'll populate that and bring that when I feel it's appropriate.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And there's one of the last bits which actually came through the training today, which was about the time, is because one of the things that's going to happen is that they're going to separate the pension fund report from the main fund report, and we're supposed to get it first before it goes to the board. I just want to be sure that's part of your planning going forward, as well as the chief internal report to come to us as well. So,
Chief.
Yeah.
What's
Chief internal
audit.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was reference during the training session this morning about in the past the chief internal auditor used to bring a report to board. I believe that was last back in 2020. Oh, Sarah, are you with us?
You seem to have frozen.
Oh dear. I don't know if she can hear me, but I was just going to say we can put that into the mix for any discussion that we have. Yes, exactly. We can do that. And just one other thing, and I'll fill Sarah in on this as well, is that we've had John, you've made a request that if possible we could make an amendment to the date of the October meeting so that you're able to attend in person.
Yeah.
There's an issue with attending on the 3rd
Yeah,
of
I couldn't.
October.
I physically couldn't attend or attend the remote action holiday that week, and because that was only issued recently, I wasn't expecting any meetings at that point. So, I can't come either physically or remotely, and I'm going to try and come physically again now. But that one I can't do. We can discuss other dates that members can do, and I'll see how I can fit around those. But the other thing I noticed was that we've got an April the 3rd here. That would take us technically into next year. Is there any chance of rejuggle? No, we've had June 27th. Is there somehow we can rejuggle these others to get the 4 in before before the 31st of March?
To get the 3rd.
To get the 4th one in, because otherwise we're going to.
Right.
Well, it depends whether we're going to have 3 or 4 this year.
You just have to be a bit careful because there's a national calendar data thing done by member services to incorporate everything, because there's all the other committees that are happening as well. And if they come up and clash with each other, it might be an opportunity to have a look at it, but it doesn't say that it can do it, because member services in the diary, that can say, well, sorry, but you can't have it that
I
way
accept
because
that, but it's just that the 3rd of April takes. We could just have 3 this year, and then the 3rd of April, we'd probably almost certainly get 4 in next year. Because if we get the first one on the 3rd of April, we'd almost certainly get 4 next year. So it might be that. I'm just saying that. I think the other thing that was mentioned this morning was one, to get the chief internal auditor back, as we say, because that used to be an annual thing until 2020. That went with COVID, I think. And the other one was that we should get the annual report and accounts here before they are approved, rather than subsequently. That's what's recommended in the new statutory guidance that has the stamp of the government on it, not my stamp, the government stamp. And I think the other ones we mentioned this morning was, and again, because these are public reports, we're not asking for anything that couldn't easily come, is that when the annual audit plan is issued, which goes to your audit and governance, that could come, as soon as possible afterwards to the board, so you can see what the audit plan is. And when the audit findings report is issued, which again, so the annual audit plan. Now I think that will go to audit and governance probably around July this year, I guess. Did last year. So if that could come to the next board, it's just a plan. Doesn't a one-page office of covering plan, but the board would then see the auditor's plan. Yeah, and then when the audit issues the audit findings report, which is when they conclude, either for 23, 24, 24, 25, which also goes to audit and governance, that could come here as well. So again, we could see that afterwards. So the board members here would see what the auditor's view of the fund, pension, accounts and report was, and could raise any questions. Because both of those reports go into the public domain when they go to audit and governance, because they could come here as well. Because the problem is, because they don't come here as well, you don't see them, you miss a big opportunity to say, well, the external auditor said this, that and the other, can you tell us about this? Or, this is great, we'd like to say that. I think it's the same with internal audit. We used to get, Tanani and Mark will remember this definitely, we used to get a very good review from the internal auditor every year. It was an exempt item, not in the public domain, in the exempt. He would come along, and we used to have some, I think, very...
Chairman, I think you'll have to discuss, or this will have to be discussed with the 151 officer, because I know how he will manage all that information through the process and manage internal and external and all the rest of it. So, the thing is for Noel to take the notes away and have it discussed there. I don't think we can't decide here.
I'm just putting this on the plan. We're not asking for the external auditors to come here. All we're asking for is those 2 reports, which go to audit and governance, to come here for information. Yeah, so that you can look at them and raise issues. So that's all we wanted from external audit. With internal audit, I think all that we're asking for is to reinstate the position that we was, and Mark and Talani will tell me if I'm wrong here, we used to get the chief internal auditor to come. It wasn't at the board's request. The officers put this before us. That happened until COVID. It hasn't happened since. It would be good to reinstate it. That was all.
There's a lot. Oh, there's Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Apologies, my machine just shut down. So
it's horrible when that happens, Sarah. I won't rehash what we've just gone through, but we've just aired a few bits and pieces to throw into the mix in terms of mapping out the work program and possibly reinstating practices that we did in the past, which I can fill you in outside the meeting.
Okay, yeah, fine.
If that's okay, are we good with that? We will look. The other thing was that we would look to find an alternative date, certainly for the October meeting, to ensure that Mr. Raisin can attend in person. The 3rd of October is problematic, so I'll explore that with the membership as soon as.
Okay. I think in addition, Mark is also on holiday. So was that what?
Yeah, regarding that date, I have got some annual leave myself in October, so I don't know how it's the 10th till the 20th, I believe. So if we're looking at any dates towards the end of October, if possible. To see how it comes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I think that about covers everything. Anybody with any final questions or anything like that on bits you want clarification on? If not, I'd like to thank you all for attending.
Sorry, I just remember there's one item, any other business. It's one that we've covered in the past, Sarah. It's regarding AVC provider Prudential.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I've had some complaints that it's not very what they call user friendly, and it's not fit for purpose when they try. Because we deal with people at all different levels of education. Not everybody's comfortable with digital technology, and they'd like to speak to somebody. Unfortunately, they've tried and they can't get through to anybody, so they've had to ask assistance, and it has to be done with a computer online. So if there's any way again a message back to AVC provider that they can look at something to provide alternatives.
Yeah, I think, Mark, obviously we have two in-house AVC providers, both Prudential and Scottish Widows.
Yeah.
You'll be aware that there have previously been issues with the Prudential that we've raised directly with them, and we have, as a collective group of LGPS funds, we are having some issues with Scottish Widows, where we've written to the regulator as well. However, both of those AVC providers, their main channels of interaction are online, and we ourselves as the administrators have to deal with them online as well. They do have some published telephone numbers, but unfortunately members will find that they have a long wait. We are, as the fund, as I said, we as the fund are in a very similar position to members. I don't believe that they are going to change that. But if you've got any specific issues, if you want to drop me an email with the details, I'll see what I can do. Certainly, whether they are going through the shared, are they coming through shared cost AVC or a standard AVC? That would be my first question. Perhaps it's something we could take offline.
Right, thank you for that one, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and special thank you for you, Sarah, because I know you've had COVID and are just recovering from a holiday as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah. She's got to get better of that COVID she has. You know, she's got too much to do, hasn't she?
That's it. Yeah.
I'm working.
Okay.
Well, I'm not meeting you two cured.
All right. Thank you.